Hello and welcome. This is Puneeth Suraana, and you are listening to Galata. I was reading the autobiography of Vinod Mehta, and that is what led me about this founder. And I just couldn't believe there's a founder like this in India. Hear this out, okay? In his 67 years, Vijaypat has undertaken a solo flight in a micro light aircraft from Britain to India. He has climbed to a height of 69,852 feet in a hot air balloon, thereby setting a world record. He has won the first international round the world race after a 24-day odyssey covering 34,000 kilometers. He has created a new breed of crossbred merino sheep for woolen fabrics that his company manufactures. He has been involved in a cattle development program, the first of its kind, to develop and propagate embryo transplantation techniques for breeding high milk yielding cows. When he has a little free time from these trifling distractions and also managing his 5,000 crore company, he wins prizes in ballroom dancing. He was in addition besotted for a short while with the idea of publishing a newspaper, which is how he and I met. I'm going to come back to this book in some time, but I want to jump into the book that I actually want to discuss with each of you today, which is Vijaypat Singhania, An Incomplete Life. I want to go through his initial family setup so you understand where he's grown up, and then move to the meat of this, which is his journey through the book. But if you notice, there isn't much about him at the helm of Raymond in this book, really. It's a very small book, and that is why he goes into a lot more details about his escapades, his journeys, his adventures, not so much about his business. I grew up within the large extended Singhania family on the banks of the holy river Ganga. It included everyone who was part of the JK organization. The company was named after Lala Jugilalji, my great-grandfather, and Lala Kamlapatji, my grandfather. They were involved in merchant banking and operated out of a gaddi, buying and selling commercially negotiable documents, promissory and demand notes. So JK organization, JNK, his grandfather's first letters. That's the organization. Now, here's an interesting bit he says right out of the bat, which I find very interesting. The fact that he is this candid in the book from the get-go. The Singhanias hail from a village in Rajasthan called Singhana. I'm one of the few people from the family who has been there, and it wasn't the pleasant experience I thought it would be. Everywhere I went, the villagers kept telling me that we had done nothing for them. The Birlas, who are fellow Marwaris, had taken their ancestral village along when they hit gold. The abusers heard that my family got so unbearable that I quickly and quietly came back home to Kanpur, where I grew up. Wow, there could be resentment in your village when you grow up and don't bring back the success. That's my note. The JK family was built. The family's wealth was built by his great-grandfather and grandfather. And I think a paragraph about them to understand the hard work and toil they put in is really impactful for both of you and I to understand the context that Vijaypat is born in and the work that was done before. Kamlapat Singhania, my grandfather, was one of the most dynamic persons you'd ever meet. He was probably the fittest in the family. His body was like that of a wrestler. He was over 6 feet tall and muscularly built, with a bushy mustache that he wore like a soldier. It was a symbol of his pride and honor. He exercised for at least 2 hours in the morning every day without fail. He was such a strong guy that while playing with the kids, he would hold a pumpkin in his left hand and with a piercing motion of his right index finger, hit the pumpkin so that it burst open. When he was in the process of constructing a building to house a new cotton spinning mill, he walked the 6-mile distance every day, going to the site to supervise the construction and stayed there all day and walked back. Wow. My note is he built the generational wealth that Vijaypat was born into. In fact, he says somewhere here, right? They laid the foundation and people of my generation took on the mantle to carry it. Another bit here is, oh yeah, When the family business was in its infancy, my grandfather became a textile salesman on foot, covering a few kilometers every day in the heat with bundles of cloth on his head. He would toil away, unmindful of the severe pain he went through that came from carrying all those textiles on his head and selling them by the foot or the yard. He sold loose cotton fabrics that people stitched into garments of their choice. Both my grandparents were strict disciplinarians, hardworking, and lived a tough life. They made us all proud of their accomplishments. They laid the foundation, and the people of my generation took on the mantle to carry it forward. Here's something about hiring and ensuring loyalty that's no longer legal but was practiced back in the day. With a few regional offices in Calcutta, Mirzapur, and Faridabad, this is of the JK organization, both Jugilal and Kamlapat were embarking on what would develop into a gigantic enterprise. Once a year, the managers of these regional markets were brought to Kanpur to give an account of how much money they had made in their transactions. Astute businessmen that they were, they knew that managers often lied about the accounts. So the two of them had devised a unique way to get to the truth. Something that would be completely legal now. An employee could get into serious trouble with the law for even attempting such stunts. Hear this out. There used to be an alcove above the doors of several rooms in our house. We used them to store a few things like the atta that we talk about. If my grandfather or great grandfather thought that the manager was lying about the numbers, he would be placed on the alcove and kept there for a day or two. Then he would be brought down and asked for the correct figure. If they still weren't convinced, back he would go. This cycle was repeated until the manager was ready to tell the truth about how much JK had actually earned. So initially, the firm, the JK organization, was actually called JK Bankers, Jugilal Kamlapat Bankers, and they were mostly into financing. And that is where they started off their ventures. Kamlapat Singhania's hundi was one of the first to be recognized and discounted by the Imperial Bank of India, which later became the State Bank of India. I don't know what discounted means here. If you know, please leave it down in the comments. There's a lot more detail about how Vijaypat grew up. He had a very, very hard childhood. He lost his mom very early on, and his mother in law did not treat him right at all. And his father wasn't the earning kind. I believe we will talk about his father. Yes. I'll tell you about his father because the story of the father is embedded in the son. It helps understanding the father. When I'm studying a founder, it really helps me to understand the father and the equation that the father and the son have. Because that's sort of like I told you, right? The story of the father is embedded in the son. Hear this out. My father, a dark man of average height, had thin gray hair. Like the other men in the family, he was overweight and had a sizable paunch which guided his walk. I hardly saw my father at home. From what I heard, he was busy at the horse races, gambling, playing cards, and indulging in alcohol and tobacco. He had a special love for music and frequently hosted singers and mushairas at home. A female singer from Hyderabad and some male singers who came to our house to entertain him went on to become Bollywood music directors or famous singers. A little more description about his father so you understand a part of where the drive for Vijaypat comes in. These were the few times we got the undivided attention of my work shy father. He was the spending kind, not the earning kind, except for what he did in his early years. And this tells you really about how business was done back in the day. And it's still done like this. My job with this is not to vilify the practices, but just to bring it to your and my notice that this is how businesses happened. The bulk of the original JK wealth came from defense contracts with the British Army. My father was largely responsible for that because he was good at PR and would follow the generals for orders of defense, supplies, clothes, shoes, and food. Bribery was his secret weapon, and he was never ashamed to admit it. In fact, he would always tell us about the British officers demanding bribes for even small favors. This is why I believe that the corruption that has seeped into every part of our public life has its origins in British rule. Corruption is not an Indian phenomenon, it's how the British trained us to do business. It's something I understood well when I joined the family business. To run any big industrial house smoothly, to get any work done, for any deal to be passed through, or even to get normal clearances, a handsome amount had to be paid to the government. There are so many stories I have of going to Delhi, dealing with politicians and bureaucrats, and going to them to get my job done. I didn't have to literally touch their feet because the money did that for me. It became like a ritual. My father's absence gave my stepmother free rein over my brother and me. We would try to run and hide in the many nooks and rooms of our house, but she was always able to find us. This is how she must have had her daily exercise. Now, there is multiple instances of his brother and he getting beaten every day by his stepmother that he gets into, and how he never really had a working relationship with his mother figure, or mother had passed on earlier. Stepmother was just a terror that he would escape as much as he could. The only one that he was really close to was his grandmother. She was a very caring woman. She was religious and God fearing and loved all her grandchildren a lot. And he was very close to her. But hear this out about her stepmother. I struggle to remember a single kind and happy moment with her. Yeah. There's one more weird practice. I mean, every family has one or the other, a lot more than that, weird practices. In theirs, it was this. Our family doctor believed that tonsils were responsible for people catching a cold and the flu. So every Singhania had his or her tonsils removed. Some families have members who look like one another while others share common hobbies. The Singhanias underwent tonsillectomy almost as a rite of passage. Another weird tidbit about him. This was the time when child marriage was normal, but just witnessing someone go through it send like shocks of shivers through me. And I believe it's something that is worth understanding about, because this was Indian tradition that has been there for centuries, and you and I are lucky to escape from it. So just for that. The elusive topic of marriage entered my life soon enough. The entire Singhania family had traveled to Calcutta for the wedding of my cousin, now Dr. Gaudhari Singhania. He was marrying into the well-to-do Jalan family there. Jalan, I don't know. Sorry. My younger uncle had settled in Calcutta, so we always had a huge house to stay in when we visited. I was 12, remember that. And looking forward to having a fun time with my cousins. There was no way I would have ever predicted what would happen soon. During one of the pre-wedding functions at the Jalan's home, my father saw a few girls playing in the courtyard. He asked to meet the father of one of the girls. When Mr. Nandakishore Jalan came to meet me, my father embraced him and told him that he wanted his elder son to marry his daughter. This was a social custom of the time, and destinies were made or destroyed by on-the-spot decisions. My elder sister, Mangla Bai, told me much later the little girl, Asha, who my father saw that day, looked like his deceased wife, my mother. He had just betrothed his 12-year-old son to a 9-year-old child. Decades later, as I type this sentence, I'm still surprised at how angry I feel. I guess he was only doing what was expected of families at that time. In the 1950s, fixing up marriages of underage children was the norm, and my deeply religious and conservative family was just towing the line. It was fairly common for even unborn kids to be promised to each other by their parents. I didn't even know that my engagement had been fixed. My wife, Asha, had to come to our home for the engagement ceremony, and this really, really irritates me. Hear this out. And she, who must have been equally bewildered by the good news, started to cry. She was cajoled with chocolates to come to my house in Calcutta for the engagement puja or sagai. It was a commitment before marriage. I was also given chocolates so I would get engaged and attend the puja on 21st of February 1951. She wore a ghagra choli and I wore the only other thing besides pant and shirt that I had. A grey striped suit with a bow tie. I used to see English gentlemen in bow ties and always thought they looked quite chic, I don't know. I'm bad sometimes with these words, yeah, so bear with me. At the ceremony, all girls huddled up and teased my fiance, shouting their guts out. I joined the boys in gossiping about the things to come. What would happen after I got married? What I would do? How and when? I was bombarded with questions that I had no answers to. It's truly shocking how no one saw the irony in enticing kids with chocolates to partake in something as monumental and life changing as marriage. They were engaged for about 5 years and a few months, and he hardly got to spend time with Asha. I don't think I ever spoke to my fiance in all those 5 years we were engaged before we got married. You know what he calls as marriage day? Hear this out, okay? These were different ceremonies and events leading up to doomsday. Doomsday. Uh, Looking back, I wish that my father had waited another 10 or 15 years before deciding my fate. He was 12 when his father decided his fate. It took me many weeks to find out the whats and hows. My friend and I used to ask one another what one was supposed to do, and then we would have a nervous laugh about it. Well, such were the times. And so you and I are extremely lucky to have had the privilege of getting married in our late to mid to late 20s and early 30s. Here's how the child marriage has progressed, just so you get an understanding. In the initial years of our marriage, my wife and I were pretty close as two kids can get. They were kids, I guess. We used to talk about our feelings and consider each other's feelings. There was love. When Asha went to her father's house after a wedding for the Gauna, I cried so much that GKS, one of his cousins, had a hard time consoling me. I missed her intensely. I couldn't wait for her to come back home. From that strong attraction and love to reaching a stage where we barely exchange a few words with each other the whole day just goes to show how fickle and fleeting emotions can be, or how early marriages prevent the building of bonds and come in the way of building communication. There's a reason why they say traveling with your partner can either strengthen a relationship or show you an unfavorable side of them. When you're spending time with each other in a new environment away from home, you find out what they're really made of. That's what happened between my wife and me, too. Despite the initial affection for each other, I was slowly realizing that she wasn't the right life partner for me, and I probably wasn't the man for her either. This is the cons of growing up in a large business family. Um, the conversation almost always is dominated by one subject and one subject alone. My brother and I stayed with our foster parents in Kanpur, my eldest uncle's family. The only conversation that took place in our house were about work. None of the adults spent any meaningful personal time with either of us. How could I, who did not see a functioning, loving relationship between my parents, learn how to love someone? My brother and I practically grew up orphans. At the end of the day, it became a very materialistic relationship rather than an emotional one. I couldn't really love my wife because nobody showed me what love means. By the time I started understanding what love meant, it was too late. This is a bit about him leading Raymond after a lot that he has gone through. He has lost a lot of personal family members. His dad, his mother he lost when he was growing up. He's lost a few cousins that he was close to. And at this point in time, he is taking in charge of Raymond. And these are the amount of initiatives he had in parallel going. Like he got married against his wishes, he also got into college against his wishes. So against my wishes, I enrolled at the Sydenham, I don't know, something like that, Sydenham College of Commerce in 1954 for graduation. I failed in the final year, reappeared and failed again. Now he wanted to take up science because that was what he was naturally curious about, but his dad insisted on commerce. And commerce he went in and he failed twice. That was the end of my formal education. I used to teach some fellow students commerce and economics. Ironically, they passed and I failed. I never took up studies again and still don't have an undergraduate degree. But then I did take a company to heights no one had ever achieved in my family. Not bad for a non graduate now, is it? Well, he was moved around a lot in different parts of the JK organization. They were into hordes of stuff from textiles to chemicals to exporting. And I mean, there's tons of businesses that they got into. And so, as one of the family members who was young and being nurtured for a leadership role, he was moved around a lot. And the details are all in the book, which I don't want to get into, but I just want to show you what an average day looked like in his early 20s and 30s. We used to leave for work early, followed by factory visits in the morning. Lunch was at home, and then work would continue till at least 10:30 p.m. at the office. All I remember of those days was working all day, coming home exhausted and hitting the bed before the cycle began all over again the next day. Here's where he gains experience across the board, from different parts of the JK organization. And one among them is this: what happened over the next few months after I joined taught me a great deal about running a business and the egos that come into play when big money is involved. In the 1980s, a new popular trade union leader was emerging in Thane. He had learned the art of not getting caught and had many henchmen. He wanted to take over the JK Chemicals trade union and use that as a stepping stone to enter Raymond. But Raymond was controlled by another socialist union. Their leader was Gulab Joshi, who was very difficult to dislodge. I was want to never meet the new trade union leader, but he sought a meeting and I felt curious. I called him to my office and he came with four of his cronies. I had gone over his long list of demands beforehand and now told him that I was ready to meet all of them. He was surprised that I did not want to negotiate. I told him I had agreed to his demands because he was a fool. He had asked me for much less than what I was already paying. Soon there was a strike, and the chemical plant started bleeding large amounts of money. I offered voluntary retirement to those who were interested. 100 people took it in their first 2 months. Everyone except 8 or 9 people opted for it in the next few months. I had started selling off my equipment and had no intention of restarting the factory as it was now losing money. The strike worked to our advantage because I could now close the factory without giving legal notice. The legal formalities would have been much more difficult for me to overcome than the monetary liability. Most of the people had anyway taken up other jobs, so the whole case fizzled out, and that was the end of JK Chemicals. As time passed, the trade union leader's power began to wane. I, on the other hand, became a hero in Thane for standing up to him. I took over the chairmanship of Raymond and ran it for the next 2 decades. Raymond became the leading national and international producer of suiting fabrics during this time. We soon started diversifying the company. It became the first company in India to manufacture both woolen and worsted fabrics. Its fibers range from 24 microns down to 19 microns in thickness. That's the diameter of the fabric, the yarn. In the finest suiting made, we used the finest wool available in the world. Having a thickness of 11 microns, this is very expensive and difficult to handle. We put up extra units in places such as Jalgaon in Maharashtra and Chindawara in Madhya Pradesh. Engineering file plans came up in Ratnagiri and Chiploon in Maharashtra, in Pitampur, Madhya Pradesh, and at Surabaya in eastern Indonesia. A woolen unit was set up in Eldoret in Kenya. We also expanded Raymond for the manufacture and retailing of denim. From basic toiletries, we entered the cosmetic business. Sometime between the 80s and 90s, Raymond became a fairly big name in the textile industry. One of the proudest moments for me was when the market acknowledged Raymond as a very respectable household name. Whether it was pants piece, suit piece, ready made suit, or safari suit, the first place Indians would go to was a Raymond shop. Currently, Raymond has an indomitable presence with over 2 million square feet of retail space spread across more than 1,100 stores in over 380 cities and towns and is growing steadfastly. Because he wasn't really connected with Asha, he had a string of affairs. And one of the first ones that he talks about actually expresses what he felt like when he was in love. And and he has had a string of affairs. This book is filled with it. But one of these instances that I want to share with you is one of the first ones. My cousin Hari Shankarji and a very close friend of the family, a journalist, accompanied us. During those days, the journalist and I became very fond of each other and soon fell in love. It was the first time I had fallen in love so deeply, and it was such a wonderful feeling. She was the most incredible woman I'd ever met. and an ideal match for me in every way. She was intellectually stimulating and the perfect partner. She was an intelligent woman who saw journalism as a noble profession. She encouraged me to start a newspaper, the Indian Post. She wasn't a conventionally beautiful woman. She had potch marks on her face, but she was beautiful to me. She had the most loving, warm heart. She used to live in Delhi, and I would go there whenever I had any time away from work. Although I have never discussed with any of them, I'm pretty sure everyone in my family, including my wife, knew about this relationship. I never tried to hide it either because that is insulting to the other person involved. Every moment spent with her was so precious to me. I had never been loved so deeply by anyone else as I was by her, before or since. One of the low points of this relationship is that this journalist ends up committing suicide, and here's why. We never discussed marriage, and even though I loved her, I never once thought of leaving my wife for her. The main reason was that it just wasn't done in those days. Husbands didn't leave their wives even if they had extramarital affairs. We had been together for almost a decade when, in the early 1990s, she killed herself. She hadn't even reached her 30th birthday. I was devastated. I thought our relationship was going just fine and thought that she didn't have any complaints. She was the kindest, most genuine, and honest person I'd ever met. I did not know why she committed suicide until about 20 years later, when my cousin, who knew about our relationship, told me it was because she wanted to marry me. While I admit that it was always unspoken, she hadn't told me in as many words. I wish we had talked about it. Maybe I would have put my foot down and married her. I wish I had thought about it seriously. It would have changed my life. I'd just become the head of the family in Bombay and of the company, and it wouldn't have been the wisest decision then, perhaps. But in retrospect, with everything that I know about life and love now, I should have married her in a heartbeat. How many lives would have been changed for the better? Yeah, I don't agree with his justification. In his 70s, now that he's wrote his book, but yeah, that breaks my heart. And I'm sure broke his heart as well many times over. There are many uh, affairs that he's had over the years that he briefly talks about in this book, sometimes in a lot of details. But I want to focus the remaining bit of time on his adventure streak and on his ability to build businesses. He is very obsessive, as most founders. So he has this obsessive streak of taking up piloting, and he ends up getting a commercial license for piloting. Um, and he also takes a break from running Raymond for 5 years, where he's a commercial pilot flying around the world, which is detailed a lot more in this book. But I don't want to get into it. But just to give you an understanding of it, he really looked up to Jahangir Ratanji Dadabhai Tata, JRD, like he's popular even to date. He was an enthusiastic amateur flyer who too had flying in his blood. His family had made its mark on Indian businesses about 40 years before mine, with interest in textiles, steel, cement, cosmetics, aviation, and pharmaceuticals. The first and most celebrated of Indian airmen, JRD was the first countryman to get a private pilot license in the days of the British Raj. I had my little airline, but JRD's airline ended up not so little, turning into the mighty Air India. And I want to share this bit and then jump into something else for you. As I entered his office, a tall figure stood up to me. Don't take more than 10 minutes with him, she whispered as I entered his room. That's all I could think about as we exchanged greetings, and I told him about my plans for a micro light flight. I confess that my real reason was want to meet him was to tell him how greatly I admired him, both as an aviator and as an industrialist. When I finished speaking, he was silent for a moment. What exactly is a microlight? He asked. I told him it was an aircraft whose empty weight was less than 150 kgs, about the weight of a middle aged married couple, with a maximum weight permitted on takeoff not exceeding 335 kg. That it was made of mostly wood, the only metal was the engine. The wheels were glued to the belly, no nuts and bolts. And these people think I'm the only crazy guy around? Tell me all about it, he replied. I didn't know where to look. Sitting in front of a giant, this Lilliput had to keep his composure. Here was his plan, and then I'll get into his next adventure, which is even more nuts. I told him how I was planning to fly from England to India, a journey of about 5,000 miles in August that year, in about 22 days. I was planning to break the record set the year before by Brian Milton at 34 days and earn myself a world record. JRD ordered some tea and biscuits for us and quizzed me for about 2 hours. His secretary must have interrupted us some 20 times, informing him about other meetings she had lined up. But JRD would hear none of it and waved her off. He was genuinely thrilled by the magnitude of what I was taking on and was excited for me. He repeatedly reminded me to carry extra spark plugs along on the trip. When I couldn't resist it any longer, I asked him the reason for his advice. What he told me has never been told or written about until now. I will hold this story back for you to read the book and find it out. It's a very interesting story. And it's linked up in the show description if you go and click on it. I'm gonna hold that back for you. Don't mind me, but it's a lot of details. I don't want to get into. This is not a book summary or an ebook, audiobook, but this is mostly the essence of the book and the learnings I've had from it. I want to get on to his next adventure, which is gonna be now. Before I tell you about his hot air balloon details, hear the reaction when he pitched it to somebody. I hadn't made up my mind about whether I was going to attempt this ride. I was still debating its merits when my team approached Don with our requirements. I'm told that when he heard that he needed to make a balloon that would fly up to 70,000 feet above sea level, he almost fell off his chair. He had never made one that could sustain itself at that height. It was his reaction that helped me make the decision. I liked shocking people and changing their opinion of me. If some man from England thought that an older man from India would be foolish enough to even dream of doing something so outrageous, I was going to prove him wrong. So began his project Mission Impossible, 70,000 feet, or MI 70K as we refer to it. Here's just an understanding of how impossible this task was. Um, the atmospheric pressure at sea levels is 1,013.2 MBS. I don't know what that stands for. While it's 70,000 feet, it is 40 MBS. That makes it impossible to breathe. And if I were to be exposed to these elements, even for a short time, my blood would literally boil, causing the body to explode. So the open basket gave way to the capsule. They were actually initially planning to have an open basket with the hot air balloon, but then they decided to have a capsule. I woke up at 2 a.m. on 26 November 2005, a little disoriented. It took a couple of seconds to realize that it was time. All the practice sessions and impromptu science lessons would boil down to what happened in the next few hours. The flight was scheduled to take off from the Mahalakshmi Racecourse grounds in Mumbai at 6:45 a.m. right after sunrise. Thousands of people had gathered there that morning, all keen to tell those who weren't there that they were there to witness history being made. I became nervous looking at the crowd because I didn't want to disappoint them. I got into the capsule at 5:30 a.m., was sealed in so that pressure checks could begin one final time, and at 6:39 a.m., the ropes holding the capsule and balloons to the ground were cut loose, and I was on my way to fulfill a death-defying mission. As I rose above Mumbai, I looked down and around to behold the city I loved so much. While I'd seen it several times when I would fly my aircraft, Mumbai looked different as I watched it from the capsule. Hundreds of tiny hands were waving me goodbye, and I was hoping they were saying a small prayer for my safe return. I got busy with my switches and getting a real time feel of all the equipment in the capsule when the ground staff radioed me, "Are you even looking at where you're going? Look at your altimeter." I looked up and realized that instead of going vertical, the balloon was drifting towards and down to the sea. I immediately turned on the emergency propane burner, and a couple of minutes later, the balloon began to lift. I was within 500 feet of the sea surface, almost touching distance when things turned around. If they hadn't, I would have crashed into the water. And no hot air balloon rider has ever survived a sea crash. I don't know that. Interesting. I thank God my reflexes were fast and I had a good team on the ground that was monitoring my every move carefully. So I was once again on my way. I later discovered the steel cables holding up my capsule had cut the ignition cables, preventing the burners from lighting, which could have led to a catastrophe. Just the start. I continued climbing and all was going well. I was enjoying the climb immensely and couldn't wait to reach the golden mark of 70,000 feet. On takeoff, the cabin pressure should have maintained the ground pressure, but with ascent, it started falling slowly, indicating a leak somewhere in the capsule. Even the ground staff was puzzled. My cabin altimeter was showing that the cabin was climbing while it should have remained at zero altitude. I remembered Sai Baba, and by 10,000 feet, the leakage miraculously stopped. How had it automatically stopped leaking? That was a mystery to solve when I returned to terra firma, which means ground. I came to know after I landed that all the air I was breathing carried water vapor. And that water that water going out at that temperature froze to ice. That ice blocked the holes where the leak was happening. The simple act of breathing was prolonging my life in more ways than one. Wow. Soon after takeoff, I realized most of the burners refused to light up. I should have returned to base. Only two of my 18 burners were functional. I started processing all the buttons around me. I started pressing all the buttons around me, hoping that some would work. The satellite tracking system had also failed. There were more in store. When I touched 65,000 feet, the balloon hit its service ceiling. It wasn't going up or down. I still have no idea what had happened. But by this time, I was confident that nothing would go wrong and that God would take care of me. I knew that I was above the Sai Baba temple in Shirdi. I prayed to him, and 10 minutes later, the balloon miraculously started to rise. It took me a long time to reach from 65,000 feet to 70,000 feet, just under an hour. The temperature outside was now minus 52 degrees centigrade. There were no more problems till I reached 69,852 feet and broke Lindstrand's record. I had done myself and my country proud. I wanted to stream in joy. Instead, I just looked out into the sun and up into space and enjoyed that unique phenomenon of being on the edge of space for a few minutes. I thought of how fortunate I was to have experienced something so wonderful, the beauty of which is inexplicable. While it was almost 11 o'clock now, and now with bright sunshine all around up above me, it was totally dark. I was looking into space. I could see the stars, an unbelievable sight. I wanted to push my luck and go a couple of thousand feet higher, but my team stopped me. The message from my team was clear. This isn't the time to be reckless, BP. You've got your record now, so now get the hell out of there. I knew I was descending towards Shiri and I didn't want that because of the presence of buildings there. They would have surely killed me. I prayed to Baba again to help me get out of Shirdi's airspace and he listened. The balloon turns towards Nashik. There was plenty of barren land, but I had to look out for high tension electric lines running up on 30,000, 32,000 volts that would kill me in seconds if my balloon touched them. My staff was looking out for me from a helicopter and telling me where to go so I would be safe. I also had a high pressure nitrogen cutter, which could cut the steel cables that supported my capsule from the balloon on landing. I would need that so I could separate from the balloon when I was about to hit the ground. I'd been warned that the force with which I would descend could result in a hard landing, which could bury the capsule about 10 feet into the ground and could also drag me between 3 and 7 miles. While that didn't happen, the capsule landed in a way that bent my door. So I was swiftly pulled out from the overhead emergency hatch that Minu quickly opened. By that time, a part of the ground around the capsule had caught fire due to kerosene leakage, and for a minute it was chaos everywhere. Some of the kerosene from the tank had spilled over. We quickly called the two rescue helicopters carrying fire extinguishers, but they both failed. Thus, it was the people on the ground, including me, who used the earth to extinguish it. We were a funny sight. 5 to 6 people on their haunches, frantically scooping mud and throwing it on this $1 million capsule. That's when someone noticed that my pants were wet and started laughing. Did you pee in your pants, sweetie? What do you think, you idiot? You didn't give me a bottle to pee in. What was I supposed to do? I had by then joined in the laughter, feeling so happy that I couldn't contain it within me anymore. I had broken another world record. I literally went to the top of the world and was still feeling as if I was there. I lay on the ground and looked up at the sky. An hour ago, that's where I was. Even though I'd just come back from up there, I couldn't believe it. That's when I noticed my balloon floating far away from me. And he loses the balloon. Around this time, he was also teaching. He became a professor at the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies for those who were studying their Masters of Management Studies, which is called MMS. And he was given complete free hand to decide the subject he wanted to teach and the way he wanted to approach it. So he decided to teach them human behavior and financial management to the 30 odd to 30 odd MMS students. He was good at both of them, so why not give it a shot? And that's how it started. And his Q&A session became extremely popular because he would bring in real life examples and you'd also bring in case studies from Raymond without mentioning it to the students. So they became extremely popular with the students. He became very popular with the students. He tried to learn as many of their names as possible because he really believed when you know their name, you know them too. That is how kids know that you care for their well being and feel close to the teachers. The kids know that someone is always looking out for them and will grow up to be well adjusted and smart. I learned that about this theory in Singapore when I was seeking admission for Ananya, his granddaughter. The principal was taking me around the school. There were 3,000 students there, and he knew the names of every single one. It impressed me so much that I immediately enforced that rule in our school. They also had a school back in their village, and that's where they're talking about. But it's amazing that he's able to don so many hats and do them so well. And he says, the key to being a good teacher, one of the things I count as learning, involves a 3 point formula. I must tell them something they don't know. I must tell them something they want to know. And I must tell it to them in a language they understand. With just these 3 points, all teachers can do a good job. There's a lot of condescending comments about Dhirubhai Ambani every now and then in the book, because I believe his rise led to a lot of others' rise, meteoric rise being stunted. And he used their resources and their growth story in his meteoric rise as well. But here's another example that he mentions. Only one person we all know now could plan ahead. Since he knew the government's thinking and often controlled it, Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani, the founder of Reliance Industries, was that man. I greatly respect Mr. Ambani for what he achieved during his lifetime, but he doesn't really respect how he achieved it. There was a much talked about story in those days that I must share with you. A Middle Eastern passenger on an Air India flight called the purser to ask if you'd ask favors from an air hostess. I don't know what a purser is, but something. Um, when the purser refused, the passenger said that in that case, he could buy the airline. When the purser repeated that he couldn't buy the airline because it belonged to the government of India, the passenger promptly responded that he would buy the government of India. Now, the purser was quite irritated. He told the gentleman he couldn't buy the government of India as the government of India was owned by Dhirubhai Ambani. That story may or may not be true, but people generally believe it even today. This is not just an autobiography, this is also his way of morally lecturing us, but hear me out. Along with corruption, the other bane of our nation is the lack of discipline. A brilliant statement by an outstanding British soldier. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery is certainly worth seriously contemplating. You can have discipline without liberty, but you cannot have liberty without discipline. Whether when there is no discipline in society, there is anarchy, violence, vandalism, and terrorism. Looting, killing, and rape are accepted as normal. They cover the bulk of media space. Yeah, I agree. He also became the sheriff of Bombay. Sheriff is the post right uh, after the mayor of the city. And there's look, once you're a founder, that obsession streak just doesn't stop. You want to do your best, you get obsessed with something or the other. In his case, it was adventures, it was women, it was living and enjoying life. And now that he's become the sheriff of Bombay, it's about his drive to make something off of that role. So he completely transforms the role as a sheriff. And it was a very chill, come visit the office any sometime, enjoy the perks and privileges of inaugurating new places, have a chai at the luxury office, which is very close to the mayor's office or something like that, and then go about your business. But he wanted to make a change, which he did. I want to dip into it for a moment, and then we'll move to the next adventure of his. There was a bureaucrat who ran the sheriff's office, and he kept me company on the days I visited. I used to go there fairly regularly, though not every day. What exactly am I supposed to do here? Nothing, sir. Just sit here. Somebody will invite you to inaugurate something. That was the role he was he was asked to step into for a year. And it was laughable and ridiculous what he said. But as I realized over the next year, it was also true. The sheriff is an officer of the High Court and the nominal head of the High Court department, which carries out the orders of the High Court for summoning people and also for the attachment and sealing of properties in their auction. I had staff at my disposal, but absolutely no executive powers. In the order of precedence, I ranked below the mayor of the city. It was just an honorary position. That's all you can make out of this. But he wasn't gonna sit and chill. This guy is a go-getter. So he got to business. Um, there were files in the office. He got them cleared up, termite ridden, got them all clean up the office, organized the mess. And the staff was shocked because no one had bothered to implement any change there so far. And they told me so. Why are you doing all this? The government will never pay you for it. I didn't ask the government for it. I just wanted the work to be done. I even got Raymond to replace all the computers there so that the actual work could happen. I was glad that my stint had started on a good note. Some of the past sheriffs would come to the office, have chai or coffee, and then leave. That is not how I was going to act at all. I abhor people who can bring about change but don't because they don't care to do anything. Such people only care about the post and not the responsibilities it brings. He later realizes this thing that but it was clear the government didn't want a hardworking man in its ranks. So, but he still offered a second term, which he, of course, refused. And I believe Vijaypat Singhania's top need amongst the six need is variety. And here's my note on this highlight as well. As someone who has always been curious about the world around me, I've tried to pursue any hobby that piqued my interest. And if it involved the outdoors, I was always game for it. I've always found hunting adventurous and fascinating. So he takes up another hobby, which is hunting. Well, the list just goes on. And he's doing all of this in his 50s and early early 60s. So imagine the drive this man has to live a full life. So it's crazy. He's still leading Raymond while he's doing all of this in parallel. And here be this bit out. At Raymond, we have always wanted to make most of our fabrics with merino wool. But importing the fiber from down under was becoming very expensive and difficult due to shortage of foreign exchange. So GKS, his cousin, decided to set up a farm to breed good quality merino sheep in Dhulia near Nashik. To begin with, we needed some sheep. It was GKS's friend, then Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser, who helped us with that. He put some female sheep in his personal aircraft, delivered them to us in Fiji, from where GKS brought them to India. We learned a lot about breeding techniques at the farm, but a few years after GK's death, we decided to shut the farm because it was bleeding us financially. I then gifted around 8,000 merino sheep we had, which were worth a fortune to the Maharashtra government's Aurangabad farm and encouraged them to take over at the breeding and wool program. These were extremely protected sheep, and it was becoming a monopoly of Australia. So they broke it through from the prime minister of the country. Can you believe that? Crazy out there. He took up photography as well as another hobby, learned it from the best man, Mr. Bharadwaj, who had won Eastman Kodak Gold Medal, which is like the thing, the highest award in photography in the world. So he just packs up hobbies, whichever interests him. There's a whole chapter about his relationship um, with his mother, with his um, wife, with his kids, with his grandkids. I think the closest he was with his grandchild. Um, he had two elder sisters, one younger brother, and he didn't really have great relationship with any of them. The two elder sisters were married off very early. The younger brother and he were very distant, apart from their ill treatment of their stepmother. He wasn't really close to his wife after the first few years of their marriage. And he had three kids, one daughter and two sons. His younger brother, Ajaypat, pretty much took the exact same route that his father did, which was when I look back now, I see many similarities between APS and my father. They were both drifters who mostly let others make the decisions for them. Despite a smart brain, they were more interested in their frivolous activities than working for a living. APS adopted every bad habit that you could think of: alcohol, gutka, tobacco, and the company of questionable friends. As time passed, I saw him morph more and more into our father. So his younger brother was not up to something. So my note here is that I am drifting towards APS, being an APS, and I need to really wean myself and focus and becoming like Vijay Path, the good part of him, not the part of him that is just out of his mind and just having terrible relationships and not being able to communicate with the people that are closest to him. And after his younger brother's passing off, here's his regret. I wish I had been intelligent and mature enough when APS was alive to have treated him like a younger brother instead of a stranger. Now I can only pray that APS's soul gets peace and that God gives him an eternal existence. If there is such a thing called rebirth, I wish APS and I are born with the same parents once again. But in that life, we have a relationship of love, kindness, respect, and open communication. Now, remember, all these four are the ones that both of these brothers were deprived of when they were growing up, and they're still yearning for it. This is a cautionary tale. This entire book is a cautionary tale about things to avoid and not do. And one among them, which for Marwaris is very crucial, is about taking care of our bodies. I've spoken about it earlier about how the reason for our plumpness and general body structure was that we were fed all kinds of food that were detrimental to our health. It was a way of life for both APS and me, but we did nothing to keep the weight off. The same fatty food that was fed to the whole family. It was not considered harmful in those days. In fact, the elders believed we would get stronger eating halwa, jalebis, and puris fried in ghee. Our family believed that only bigger bodies gave us strength in old age. So they did their best to get us there. I suppose a subconscious element for that could also have been the security of women. Almost everyone then and now believes that burly men are natural protectors, and our family probably had that goal in mind when they fed us. Unfortunately, the study of the human body and medicine had not developed much then to tell my family members that the wrong diet can severely damage the body and hurt us later in life. In fact, both APS and I paid a heavy price for such carelessness. An hour a day in the gym now is one day less in the hospital when you are old, is the thing that I have written in my highlight. Got to take care of your body, especially if you're a Marwari. This is the fourth generation with money. The the ability to respect and value money is completely lost because when members of a family don't earn any money, they do not know its value and the amount of hard work and effort it takes to earn even a small amount, let alone the crores they wish to use. When people blow up money, they usually attract bad people like honey attracts flies. APS's friends were his friends just so they could suckle the honey from him. Well, there's a lesson for both of us, you and me here. One member of his family that he really was close to for the and even today is his granddaughter Ananya. She's his eldest granddaughter. She's really close to him. He's written a whole book about her as well. Um, he became a grandpa at 47, ladies and gentlemen, just for your information. At 47, this man became a grandpa. It is said that grandparents love their grandkids more than their own children. In my case, it is true. They have brought unparalleled joy to my life. Um, in fact, he talks about them extensively in the last chapters, which is worth studying. But I would just leave you with two more things. Out of the four of us, two elder sisters and a younger brother, I'm the only sibling left now. Everyone who knew me when I was young is gone. They shared all my memories, and now I have no one to look back and laugh with. The chroniclers of my life are dead, and I'm all alone. It's like the Charlie Bungus quote, right? 99% of the people I know are dead. Um, that's my highlight here. And then the last chapter is about the biggest mistake of his life. I just want to read the mistake, and I will leave the rest in the book for you to read. Of all the bad decisions I've made over the 4 years, giving away all my wealth to my youngest son definitely takes the cake. One, on that day, after signing a four-line document that GHS's his son, Gautam Singhania, GHS's attorney, had prepared in advance, I gave away my stake. 37.717% of the equity shares of Raymond to my son Gautam Hari. The shares were at that time worth in excess of 2,000 crores. Today they are worth a lot more. The market cap of the company was well above 2,800 crores. And in return, I found myself on the street. Well, I will leave it at that. For the entire story, I would ask you to please check out Vijaypat Singhania as an Incomplete Life. A way to support the podcast is by going to the link in the show description and buying the book. At no additional cost to you, you can support the podcast because Amazon sends a referral to me. And with that, go and make some Galata.